A popular physician with the perfect bedside manner.
Exuded the love and attention of the doctor, and he in turn loved being the doctor.
But behind it, a gifted actor with a mysterious past.
I think he really thought he could do anything.
A mastermind with a brilliant plan born out of pure fantasy.
He was getting better and better and more dangerous.
And a stunning secret that conceals decades of elaborate deception. Irvine, California, 1979. Every day, patients stream into Pacific Southwest Medical Group. Many are here to see Dr. Gerald Barnes. For the past 3 years, he's been the clinic's most popular doctor, renowned for his friendly manner.
Dr. Barnes would see probably 30 to 40 patients a day. He endeared himself to lots of patients and people, and was well-liked.
He was well-respected. The patients seemed to like him. He seemed to have the good manner. He worried about the patient, talked to them. He was considered to be a good doctor.
He kept people laughing and smiling. He knew how to develop a connection.
He really exuded the love and attention of the doctor, and he in turn loved being the doctor.
Barnes is so well liked by patients, his colleagues are willing to overlook his oddly sloppy technique.
I worked with Gerald Barnes for a number of years, every day. When you work closely with somebody, their deficiencies come to light. His sterile technique when suturing up a laceration was non-existent. He, constantly went to his face and eyes and mouth with gloves on, which is a, big no-no. But you kind of let things like that slide. You say, well, maybe the guy's a little sloppy.
But Barnes's carelessness is about to have catastrophic consequences. On December 26th, 29-year-old John McKenzie stumbles into Pacific Southwest. He is dizzy and disoriented. Dr. Barnes immediately examines him. Nothing in the patient's past indicates any severe problems. The doctor tells McKenzie his illness is minor.
He reassured the patient that he had a little viral infection, an inflammation of the inner ear, and that's it. Nothing else.
Barnes draws a blood sample, prescribes pills to control dizziness, and sends McKenzie home to rest. 2 days later, while Barnes is on vacation, physician's assistant Rick D'Alessandro receives McKenzie's blood test results. He is shocked by what they reveal.
He had a 900 blood sugar, normal being 80 to 110. The patient had diabetes, and Barnes did not recognize it.
Realizing McKenzie's diabetes could kill him at any moment, D'Alessandro tries to reach him by phone. There's no answer. Fearing the worst, he calls police.
Police find him at his apartment laying on the ground, unconscious, and break down his door and come back and get on the phone and tell me that he's dead. And as the fates would have it, he has a prescription bottle laying on the floor next to him, which is from Gerald Barnes with this anti-dizzy medication.
How did an experienced physician like Dr. Barnes overlook McKenzie's deadly symptoms? To D'Alessandro, it seemed oddly suspicious.
I called the Board of Medical Examiners, and I told them that I was a PA working underneath someone who I thought may not be a physician, and I needed to verify some information.
The medical board confirms Gerald Barnes is indeed a licensed doctor. But other facts in the file baffle D'Alessandro, including Barnes's address.
Well, it was not where Gerald Barnes lived. It was anywhere close.
Based on D'Alessandro's suspicions and the sudden death of John McKenzie, the medical board immediately notifies the Orange County Prosecutor's Office. Investigators check Barnes's credentials and quickly uncover the stunning truth. Dr. Barnes is not responsible for the death of John McKenzie, because John McKenzie never saw Dr. Barnes. He was treated by an imposter. How could an untrained imposter fool dozens of doctors and hundreds of patients? Detectives would uncover the answers in Barnes' surprising past.
I learned quite a few things about him, including an earlier time in his life from the city of Chicago
Gerald Barnes was born Gerald Barnbaum in 1933. Growing up in Chicago, he was a class clown, a science whiz, and a talented actor. As an adult, Barnbaum became a star of community theater. He even began to legally use his stage name, Gerald Barnes, a move that would inadvertently prepare him for what would become the biggest role of his life. But with a growing family to support, Barnes gave up acting to become a pharmacist. Then in the early 70s, he began working alongside doctors at a neighborhood clinic.
They agreed to take him on as their assistant. So he learned how to do suturing of wounds, for instance, and he learned this by practicing at home on a chicken. He thought that he had mastered the entire art of sewing people up based on this one experience of suturing a chicken.
The more Barnes worked with doctors, the more he boldly believed he could be one himself, but he had no intention of spending years in training.
Medical school didn't appeal to him. He didn't need it. He said he couldn't afford it. He didn't have the time for it. And he felt that he was smarter than most doctors.
By 1973, Barnes' life began to unravel. First, his wife filed for divorce. Then his pharmacy license was revoked when his employers were caught up in an insurance scam. Barnes decided to leave his past behind and move west to start a new life, where he would soon hatch a plan to combine his two greatest loves, medicine and acting.
This is when he decided he would go to Hollywood. He decided that all aspiring actors and physicians should go to Hollywood, and that this was the land of opportunity for imposters.
In March of 1976, Barnes fabricates an impressive resume and answers a want ad from a small LA clinic desperate for doctors. He sells himself as an experienced physician and is hired on the spot. Amazingly, the clinic never even asks to see a medical license.
He had enough knowledge about medication, and he had picked up enough knowledge reading magazines and studying books that he could represent himself as a physician and get by on the minor things. And then he adopted a very friendly, easygoing mannerism so that people accepted him without really asking a whole lot of questions.
But Barnes knows that just acting like a doctor is not enough to fool colleagues and patients for long. So he concocts an elaborate scheme to get his hands on legitimate medical credentials. First, he scours a California medical directory and finds the key to his plan: a real doctor with the same name.
He called the California Medical Board and indicated that there had been a fire, his credentials had been burned and lost, and he needed new credentials.
The medical board hadn't had any experience with this type of thing, so they're thinking that the real Dr. Barnes needs another copy of the licensure, so they mail it out.
The former Gerald Barnbaum, failed pharmacist and skilled actor, finally has a foolproof false identity, a bona fide medical license, in his very own name.
He functioned in the shadow of the true person, and when people checked him out, they were checking out the real Dr. Barnes.
For years, Barnes' scheme works perfectly. But the negligent death of John Mackenzie in 1979 leads investigators to finally uncover Barnes' masterful deception and arrest the phony physician for manslaughter. To the real Dr. Barnes, the news comes as a shock.
My wife was driving down the road and heard on the radio that I had been, Dr. Gerald Barnes had been arrested for manslaughter, which was really threw her for a loop.
In August of 1980, the phony Gerald Barnes pleads guilty to manslaughter, forging prescriptions and practicing medicine without a license. He is sentenced to 3 years in prison.
When he was sentenced, I knew we would see him again. He enjoyed the imposter role. He felt that he could play this part.
Even in prison, Barnes introduces himself as Dr. Gerald Barnes, a character he continues to perfect behind bars.
Everyone referred to him as Doc, and Barnes loved it. He loved the attention. He loved the level of respect that being a doctor or perceived as a doctor gave him.
After serving only 18 months of his 3-year sentence, Gerald Barnes is set free for good behavior. Barnes wastes no time in inventing a new scheme. he retrieves copies of the real Dr. Barnes' credentials that he had hidden away before going to prison. Then he easily lands a new job as a doctor at the Cameron Medical Group in West Covina, California.
I guess there must be some thrill to it, to be playing this role and thinking you're getting away with it.
Gerald Barnes felt not only that he was smarter than other physicians, but that he was smarter than law enforcement.
It's almost like part of the game was to see if he could pull it off.
In his white coat and stethoscope, Barnes is reveling in his scam, oblivious to the fact that another round of cat and mouse with investigators is about to begin. Los Angeles, 1984. Just a year after serving a prison sentence for manslaughter, master imposter Gerald Barnes is once again masquerading as a doctor, and detectives have no idea that Barnes has schemed his way into another clinic.
He was cautious and was able to maintain his charade as a doctor by not sticking his neck out.
Barnes devises a brilliant strategy, one that will not only disguise his lack of training, but also enable him to circumvent the law.
He became a referral person. Somebody came in with some complaints, he referred him to a real doctor.
For 3 months, Barnes' work at the clinic goes undetected. But in May of 1984, Barnes makes his second critical misstep. He applies for hospital privileges using the real Dr. Barnes' medical license number. Within days, the real Dr. Barnes discovers the dangerous imposter is at it again.
The administrative office called me and wanted to know if I was planning on practicing family practice in Southern California. And I said, why in the world would I want to do that?
Dr. Barnes immediately notifies the medical board, and the phony doctor is arrested for the second time for practicing medicine without a license. But incredibly, it's only a misdemeanor. Frustrated investigators learn that to charge him with a felony, they must prove he endangered patients' lives, and that will be almost impossible. By simply referring patients to specialists, Barnes has avoided dispensing any real medical care. He's confident that he's outsmarted the system.
My investigator told me he hasn't done anything. He's staying, he's low key. We don't seem to have a felony practicing medicine. Then I said, well, they are paying him, aren't they?
Prosecutors devise an ingenious tactic. They charge Barnes with grand theft of $20,000, his 4 months' salary. Over the next decade, Barnes continues to masquerade as a doctor. 4 more times, his schemes land him in prison. But nothing stops him. Even behind bars, he faces few restrictions. The career imposter utilizes the time to sharpen his medical skills and perfect his doctor's role.
He had all that time to study medical journals and all the magazines. He took as many of the mail order tests as he could possibly take. He went to the length of actually studying and getting his radiology license.
He simply carried on as a physician inside prison. There was no difference to him.
In 1993, after serving his 5th prison sentence, Gerald Barnes confidently secures a job at a Hollywood blood clinic with the same fake credentials he's been using from the start.
This was his career. His career was to deceive people into making them believe he was a doctor and getting paid for it.
That winter, as Barnes attends a company Christmas party, he fails to recognize that a figure from his past is among the holiday crowd.
There's probably maybe 1,000 people at this Christmas party. It's a huge thing. And I see Gerald Barnes with a name tag on, Dr. Gerald Barnes.
15 years earlier, Rick D'Alessandro had unmasked the phony Dr. Barnes after he fatally misdiagnosed John Mackenzie. It is obvious to Rick that Barnes is still the master con man, but instead of confronting him, he again alerts the state medical board. Despite Barnes' deceitful past, the warning goes uninvestigated. Incredibly, Barnes is left alone, free to continue his deadly charade.
He just kind of slid through the cracks, basically, in the system.
The medical board bureaucracy did not view him as enough of a threat to even red flag the file of the real Dr. Barnes. So if any inquiries ever came to the state medical board pertaining pertaining to Barnes, there would at least be some sort of oversight. There wasn't.
In July of 1995, Barnes' fake medical credentials help him land his dream job, staff physician for Executive Health Group, an LA clinic that caters to corporate executives and government agencies.
He had progressed from treating the street people for colds, flu, minor illnesses, to actually performing endoscopies in a manner that an untrained person could very easily have made a mistake and caused serious injury or death to these people.
2 months later, an FBI agent walks into Executive Health Group. He asks to see Gerald Barnes. In the exam room, the agent removes his weapon and his clothes. He's here for his annual physical, but has no idea it will be performed by an imposter.
We also did fit-for-duty exams for the FBI, and also their new employee exams.
Over the next 6 months, Barnes takes the biggest risk of his bogus career. Week after week, he examines one FBI agent after another, hundreds in all.
He had the FBI quite literally in his hands, and he got a thrill, a perverse thrill from that.
March 1996. 2 years after D'Alessandro alerted the medical board, Vaughn Kane, a new investigator, inherits the Barnes case. It doesn't take long for Kane to track down Barnes at Executive Health Group's downtown clinic.
He had on a white jacket, stethoscope around his neck. Very friendly, "I'm Dr. Barnes, come on back."
At first, Barnes denies the investigator's accusations. Then his demeanor suddenly changes.
It was just like you'd lowered a curtain. He changed and become this different person, that, like a trapped animal, he was wanting out.
Barnes threatens suicide, but that tactic just forces Kane to call the LAPD to put Barnes into protective custody.
We were required by law to see to his well-being when he started committing suicide. So he had, in effect, thrown up this barrier to escape.
Realizing his suicide ploy has backfired, Barnes panics. He makes one last desperate attempt to fool the investigators.
He was complaining of chest pains, he was perspiring, he was in great anxiety.
He starts grabbing his chest, so, "Well, you know, I think I'm having a heart attack."
But the heart attack is just another performance. Barnes is taken into custody and put on a 48-hour suicide watch. Meanwhile, the clinic alerts their client, the FBI, about Barnes' scam. Since federal agents are victims, his crime is now a federal offense.
The charges had the full force and weight of the FBI behind them, because the FBI had been humiliated.
In October of 1996, Barnes pleads guilty to a list of federal charges ranging from fraud to forgery. 4 years into his 12-year sentence, Barnes puts in a request for a prison transfer from California to Illinois.
And they thought he would never get out. But they didn't recognize that Gerald Barnes was always, from the very beginning, plotting his escape. He was going to exploit a loophole, and the loopholes were there to exploit.
Due to his good behavior, he is granted an unescorted furlough and dropped off at the local bus station. When the bus arrives in Illinois, the 67-year-old imposter is nowhere to be found. He is now a federal fugitive.
Well, that wasn't recognized, that as time went on, he was getting better and better and more dangerous.
In Barnes' prison cell, detectives find a letter sent to him by a former inmate. U.S. Marshals quickly track down the ex-con, who tells them that Barnes has already plunged back into his imposter's facade.
This former inmate informed me that Gerald Barnes was working as a doctor and provided Gerald Barnes' business card. Well, Gerald Barnes has been out for approximately 4 weeks. In that time, he acquired a girlfriend, a new car, and a new job, practicing as a doctor.
Investigators go directly to the clinic where they find Gerald Barnes doing what he does best, posing as a doctor.
First thing out of his mouth was, "You guys are good." And I said, "No, you're just a lousy fugitive."
It was the last time Gerald Barnes ever saw freedom.
The guy's got a sickness that I don't think any of us really thought would be as persistent as it is.
I really think that Barnes is unique. He has a psychological urge to do this. There's no question in my mind.
After posing as a doctor for more than 2 decades, 70-year-old Gerald Barnes is serving 20 years for fraud and practicing medicine without a license. To fellow inmates, the brilliant con artist is still known as Doc.
I still believe that if he was released tomorrow, within a month or 2, he will get a job and go back practicing as a physician again. He has it in his blood.
Tomorrow, an African-American man posing as a blonde supermodel cons Colorado Springs out of $185,000. All New Masterminds is back at 3, but next, crime stories.
Whoa!